can have anything in this world worth having without first earning it. If any of you happen to be students of Emerson, if you've read the law of compensation, you'll get the sum and the substance of this lesson very much more quickly, and you'll also get more out of it. After I had read Emerson's essays for 10 years, especially the one on compensation, and finally had interpreted what he was talking about, I said that someday I would rewrite that particular essay so that men and women could understand it the first time they read it. And the lesson that you get tonight is that rewrite. We call it the law of cosmic habit force because it is the controlling force of all of the natural laws of the universe. You know, we have many natural laws, and obviously they all work automatically. Obviously, they're not suspended for one moment for anybody. And those laws are laid down so that the individual who makes it his business to understand them and adapt himself to them can go very far in life, and those who do not understand them and adapt themselves to them go down in defeat. You've often wondered about this subject of habit, how we happen to have habits, how we get them, how we get rid of the ones we don't want. And I hope that you'll get a fleeting glimpse tonight of the answer to these questions. You, of course, know I have repeated time and time again the importance of recognizing that man has control over but one thing, and one thing only, and that's the privilege of forming his own habits, tearing down those habits and replacing them with others, refining them, changing them, doing anything in the world that he wants to do with them. He has that complete prerogative, and he's the only creature on the face of this earth that has that privilege. Every other thing that comes into life has its pattern, its life pattern, and its destiny fixed for it, and it cannot go one iota beyond that pattern. We call it instinct. A man is not bound by instinct. He's bound only by the imagination and the willpower of his own mind. He can project that willpower and that mind to whatever objective he pleases. He can form whatever habits he may need in order to take him toward his objectives. And this lesson that you're on tonight deals with that subject. The purpose of the science of success, course, which you've been studying, incidentally, in the previous lessons, are based and designed to enable one to establish habits that lead to financial security, health, and peace of mind necessary for happiness. In this lesson, we examine briefly the established law of nature, which makes all habits permanent to everything else except mankind. Now, there's no such a thing as a permanent habit for man, because he can establish his own habits. He can change them at will. You know, that's a marvelous thing when you stop to consider that the Creator gave you complete control over your mind and gave you a means of making use of that control. And this law of cosmic habit force is the means by which you set the pattern of your own mind and direct it to whatever objectives you choose. Now, some of the habits which are fixed by cosmic habit force and which are not subject to suspension or to circumvention are, first of all, the stars and the planets as they are established in their fixed courses. Isn't it a wonderful thing to contemplate all of those millions, billions, quadrillions, and trillions of planets and stars out there in the heavens, all going along according to a system, never colliding, so precise in the system that the astronomers can determine hundreds of years in advance the precise relationship of given stars and planets? Isn't it a marvelous thing to recognize that all of that is carried on according to a system? You know, if the Creator had to hang out those stars and watch everything every night, he'd be a very busy fellow. Now, he's not going to do that, I don't think. He's got a better system. He's got a system that works automatically. If you learn what those laws are, you can adapt yourself to them and profit by them. If you don't learn what they are, you'll probably through ignorance or neglect, you will suffer by them. I notice that the majority of people, not recognizing that there is a law of cosmic habit force, go all the way through life using this marvelous law. What for? To bring prosperity and health and success and peace of mind? No. To bring poverty and ill health and frustration and fear and all of those things that people do not want by keeping their mind on those things. And cosmic habit force picks up those habits of thought and makes them permanent. That is, until I come along and break them up with this science of success philosophy, and that's just why you're here. Mr. Stone and I had a very charming lady in our office last week wanting to sell us some space or something in a book that she was getting out based upon the birth dates of people. She wanted to know what my birth date was. And Mr. Stone didn't let her get very far with her story because he told her that he would have nothing to do whatsoever with any system or book that presupposed that birth date had anything to do with what happened to one in life. And when he got through, he said, "Now, I can't speak for Napoleon Hill, but that's my decision." And I said, "Well, you've just made my speech now, Mr. Stone. I don't care what star you were born under. I don't care what unfavorable circumstances you may have met with in life. I don't care what happened to you in the past. I do know that I can take you, and if you follow my instructions, you can get from where you are now to where you want to go, and you'll get there easily. I know that. And I know that you can set up habits that will make your success so easy, you'll wonder why in the world you worked so hard in the past and didn't get so far." You know, most people work harder at failing in life than I work at succeeding, a whole lot harder. It's much easier to succeed when you learn the rules, and a lot more pleasure in it, than it is to fail. And you certainly are not going to succeed unless you understand this law of cosmic habit force and start building habits that lead to where you want to go. All actions and reactions of matter are based upon the fixed habits of cosmic habit force. Have you ever stopped to think of it? That the very smallest particles of matter all exist as a result of habits that are fixed upon. And the perpetuation of every living thing through the sex principle. Each seed reproduces its own kind, but each individual reproduction is modified by the vibrations, that is, the environmental influences of the environment in which it exists. Thought habits of individuals are automatically fixed and made permanent by cosmic habit force. Now, there is one for you to think about. Thought habits of individuals are automatically fixed. Whether you will it or not, the thoughts that you give expression to are going to be fixed into habits. You don't need to worry about it. If you keep your mind on the things that you want to become a habit, cosmic habit force will take over from there on out. The individual creates the pattern of his thoughts by repetition of thought on a given subject, but the law of cosmic habit force takes these patterns and makes them permanent unless they are broken up by the will of the individual. Wouldn't it be a terrible thing if we couldn't break habits? And when I see the number of people smoking cigarettes nowadays, I'm beginning to think maybe they can't break that habit. When I see all the publicity that the magazines and newspapers give about the high death rate of lung cancer due to cigarettes, I'm wondering whether or not people can break the cigarette habit. Well, don't get mad about it. I don't smoke either. Something to think about, though, isn't it? You know, I'll tell you something, friends. If you want to go ahead and get lung cancer smoking cigarettes, that's your business. I haven't a thing in the world to say about it. Well, I want to give you a little test that might be helpful. If you can't start out tomorrow morning and prove that your willpower is stronger than a little pinch of tobacco in a little piece of silk paper, then you want to begin working on your willpower right away and re-educating it. When I quit smoking, I laid my pipes down. I told Annie Lou to take them and throw them away. I wouldn't be needing them. She said, "Put them away until you call for them." I said, "Throw them away. I'll not be needing them." Habits? Well, if you can't get control of the habit of smoking, it's going to be very difficult for you to get control of some of these other habits of fear and of poverty and of other things that you're allowing your mind to dwell upon too. When I have some enemies to deal with, I always take the biggest guy first. When I lick him, then the rest of them usually take their tails between their legs and run. And if you've got some habits you want to break, don't start with the little easy ones. Anybody can do that. Start with the big ones, the ones that you want to do something about. Take that pack of cigarettes that you have in your handbag there, ladies, or in your pocket, gentlemen, half smoked up now, and when you go home, put it upon the dresser. Say, "Look here, fellow, you may not know it, but I'm more powerful than you are, and I'm going to prove it by not going into that package again. I'm going to sit there for 40 days, after which I won't need cigarettes anymore." Now, I don't think that I am talking against the cigarette business. You know, after all, I don't have any stock in the cigarette companies. I am just giving you some ideas through which you must start testing your capacity to build the kind of habits that you want by starting with the tough ones. I'll give you another habit. If you'll go on a week's fast, a whole week without any food, tell your stomach that you're the boss. It may think it's the boss, but you're the boss. Now, don't do this on your own. Do it under the directions of a doctor, because fasting is not anything not child's play. Get control over your stomach, and you'll be surprised at how many other things you have control over when you have control over your stomach. You know, how in the world can we expect to be successes in this world if we are going to allow all these myriad habits that come along through the circumstances of our daily life to take hold of us and rule our lives? We can't expect to be successes. We have to form our own habits long enough until cosmic habit force takes them up automatically. Now, let's take up the question of how the individual may apply the law of cosmic habit force. First, in connection with physical health. The individual may contribute to the healthful maintenance of his physical body by establishing habit patterns in connection with the following subjects, and there are 4 of them. And it's not very difficult to do this. If you want to prove the soundness and the potency and the effectiveness of this law of cosmic habit force, here is a mighty fine place on page 2 to start in. Because I don't know of anything in this world that men and women want any more than to have a good, strong, physical body that responds to every need in life. I couldn't do the kind of work that I do. I couldn't write the inspirational books. I couldn't deliver inspirational lectures if I didn't know that when I put my foot on the gas, so to speak, that there's going to be power there. And no matter how steep the hill or how long, I know that I've got plenty of power to go the full distance because I keep my body in that kind of condition. First of all, in connection with your thinking. That's the place to start in connection with applying cosmic habit force for the purpose of developing sound health. Now, a positive mind leads to the development of what is known as a health consciousness. You know what a health consciousness is? What is it? Just what do I mean when I talk about a health consciousness or a prosperity consciousness or any other kind of a consciousness? An awareness, a continuous awareness of a condition, don't you know? In other words, a predominating tendency of your mind to think about health and not about disease or ailments. Now, most people, they have a wonderful time telling about their operations. I had a very good friend of mine visit me not more than 6 months ago, and he had just come out of the hospital. And I want to tell you that his vivid description of his operation was such that I could feel the surgeon's scalpel turning in my back. Yeah, I finally turned around and rubbed my back. It began to hurt back there where he was describing. It really did, before I got myself under control. But I didn't ask him to come back to see me again when he left. And most people don't like to hear you talk about your ailments. They're not interested in your ailments. You ought not to be either, except to get rid of them. And the best way to get rid of them is to form a health consciousness. Think in terms of health. Talk in terms of health. Look in the glass a dozen times a day and say, you healthy man or you healthy woman. Talk to yourself. You'll be surprised at what will happen. Now, the positive mind leads to the development of what is known as a health consciousness, and cosmic habit force carries out the thought pattern to its logical conclusion. But it will just as readily carry out the picture of an ill health consciousness created by the thought habits of the hypochondriac, even to the extent of producing the physical and the mental symptoms of any disease on which the individual may fix his thought habits through fear. Isn't that a marvelous thing to know that if you think about a certain ailment or disease long enough, nature will actually simulate it in your physical makeup? We had down in Wise County, Virginia, I know elderly lady down in the mountain section, when I was a small boy, used to come over to my grandmother's every Saturday afternoon and sit on the front porch and entertain us all afternoon with the operations of herself, her husband, what her husband died with, what her mother died with, what 2 of her children died with, and then she always wound up, after about 3 or 4 hours of this, by saying, I know that I'm going to die of cancer. Put her hands on her left breast like this. I've seen her do that a dozen times. I didn't know what cancer was at the time. I found out later. Years later, some 10 years later maybe, my father sent me a copy of the county paper, and I saw an announcement of Aunt Sarah Ann Steele's death of cancer of the left breast. She finally talked herself into it. Now, that's not an exaggerated case at all. It just happens to be one of the cases that I know about. You can talk yourself into a headache. You can talk yourself into a bilious condition. You can talk yourself into anything and think yourself into it if you allow your mind to dwell upon the negative sides of your physical body. So thinking is important. Now, in eating, the mental attitude and the thought patterns established while one is eating and during the following 2 or 3 hours while the food is being broken down into liquid form for introduction into the bloodstream may determine whether the food enters the body in a suitable form for the maintenance of sound health. And did you know that the mental attitude that you're in when you're eating becomes a part of the energy that goes into your bloodstream? Did you know that? Well, if you don't know that, you better be learning about it, because it does. You can't afford to eat when you're disturbed. You just can't afford to do it. You can't afford to eat when you're too tired physically. Sit down, rest, relax. As a matter of fact, food should be a form of a religious exercise. It should be a ceremony, a religious ceremony. When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is to go out to the kitchen and squeeze, that is when I'm home, squeeze a nice, great, big, long glass of orange juice. I worship every drink, every ounce of that orange juice as it goes down. I don't just turn up a glass and go, let it all go down once. I let it go down a little at a time and worship every mouthful of it. Now, if you think I'm just kidding, if you think I'm just filling in time because I don't have anything else to say, perish the idea, because I'm telling you something that's very important about your eating. And if you get into the habit of blessing your food, not only when you sit down to the table, but bless it as it goes into your body, if you get into the habit of doing that, I want to tell you right now, it'll go a long way toward keeping you healthy. And then third, in connection with your work. Here, too, mental attitude becomes a vital ally of the silent repairman that is working on every cell of the body while one is engaged in physical action. Therefore, work should become a religious ceremony also, with which only positive thoughts are mixed. I think one of the tragedies of civilization consists in the fact that there are so few people in the world at any one time who are engaged in the labor of love. That is, doing the thing they want to do because they want to do it, not because they just have to eat and sleep and wear some clothes. I'm hoping and praying that before I shall have crossed over on the other side, that I will have made valuable contributions to mankind to the end that individuals may find a labor of love in which to make a living and earn their way. What a grand world this would be to live in if it weren't for some of the people who live here. And what's wrong with some of the people? Well, not anything wrong with them, it's just their habits that are wrong. They think wrong, that's what's the matter with them. Let them think in terms of good health and of opulence and of plenty and of fellowship and of brotherhood instead of stirring up race riots, all of that sort of thing, setting man against man and brother against brother, nation against nation, thinking in terms of war instead of cooperation. Why, there's plenty in this world for everybody, including the squirrels and animals and birds. Plenty of it for everybody. If only some people wouldn't try to get too much and try to keep other people from getting enough. Through wrong thinking. I honestly don't want any advantage, any benefit of any nature whatsoever that can't be shared with all of my people, everywhere. I don't want anything that I can't share with people. I want no advantage over other people, save only the opportunity of sharing with them my knowledge and my ability to help them to help themselves. Work, what a marvelous thing it is. Observe that, for instance, the famous Mayo brothers have discovered that 4 vitally important factors must be observed to maintain sound physical health. An equal balancing through thought habits of work and play and love and worship. Now, is that an interesting thing? That's authentic and comes from the great Mayo Institute, where they have had thousands of people pass through their clinics. They have found out that where those four things are out of kilter, out of balance, almost invariably it results in some form of physical ailment. Observe that here enters a sound explanation of one of the major reasons for adopting and following the habit of going the extra mile. This habit not only benefits one economically, but it enables one to work with a mental attitude that leads to sound physical health. Isn't that a wonderful thing? When you're doing something out of a spirit of love, out of a spirit of desire to be of help to other people, not out of a selfish desire, it tends to give you better health and to build up better health habits. And for comparison, consider the person who has the habit of griping and performs all work grudgingly and in a negative frame of mind. Nobody wants to even work with him. And nobody wants to employ him if he can find somebody else who doesn't gripe. The fellow who gripes while he's working not only damages himself, but he damages everybody around him. Mr. Andrew Carnegie told me that one single negative mind in an organization of 10,000 could more or less discover the mind of everyone in there inside of 2 or 3 days without even opening his mouth or saying anything, just by releasing thoughts. You go into a home where there's fighting between members of the family, and the moment you cross the threshold, even when you get in I can tell when I get in the front yard whether I want to go in or not, whether it's safe to go in or not. And certainly after I get in there, I can tell. We have an experience in our home that makes me prouder than anything I can tell you about. Almost invariably, when a person walks into our home for the first time, they look around and make some complimentary expression such as this. For instance, an outstanding publisher came to see me not long ago, and when he walked into our living room, he said, "Oh, what a beautiful home." And then he looked around again, and after all, it was just an ordinary home. There's not anything outstanding about it. He said, "Well, the word beautiful is not just the word I want." He said, "It's the way I feel when I get in here." He said, "The vibrations are good." I said, "Now you're getting hot. You're getting up my alley." This home is charged and recharged constantly with positive vibrations. No inharmonies inside of this house are permitted. Even our dogs have picked that up, our little Pomeranians. They respond to the vibrations of that home. And they can tell a person that's not in harmony with that home the moment they come in, and they don't like that kind of a person. Little Sparky will go up and sniff a person, and if he's pleased with that harmonious atmosphere, she'll go over and kiss his hand. And if she's not pleased, finds that he's not in harmony, she'll bark at him and back away. I didn't teach her that either. It's her own idea. So homes, places of business, streets, cities, all have their own vibrations made up of the dominating thoughts of those who work and go that way. You go down Fifth Avenue in New York City, I don't care whether how little money you've got in your pocket, and if you walk along there with those big prosperous stores along about Tiffany's, you'll catch the feel of that crowd, and you'll feel like you're prosperous too, although you may not have very much money. You'll go just 4 blocks over in the other direction, over to 8th Avenue or 9th Avenue in Hell's Kitchen, and I defy you to walk 1 block there without feeling like you were as poor as a church mouse, even though you may have all the money in the world. Economic and financial benefits. Let's see what we're going to get out of this in connection with cosmic habit force. First of all, a definite major purpose. And through a combination of the principles of the philosophy of American achievement, one may condition his mind and body to hand over to cosmic habit force the exact picture of the financial status he wishes to maintain, and these will automatically be picked up and carried out to their logical conclusion by an inexorable law of nature which knows no such reality as failure. Now, I have observed by studying people who are successful, and I've had probably more opportunity to study successful people at close range than any other man living today, I have observed that they think constantly in terms of things they can do, never in terms of things they can't do. I once asked Henry Ford if there was anything he wanted to do that he couldn't do. He said, "Why, no, I don't think about the things I can't do. I think about the things I can do." Now, the majority of people, however, are not like that. They think about the things they can't do and worry about them, and consequently, they can't do them. They think about the money they don't have and worry about it, and consequently, they don't have it and never get it. You know, money is a peculiar thing, isn't it? Somehow or another, it just doesn't follow the fellow around that doesn't believe he's got a right to get it. I wonder why that is. Money is a kind of an inanimate thing. I don't believe it's the fault of the money. I don't think the fault's there. I think it's in the mind of the person who doubts that he can get it. I notice that when the students of mine start believing that they can do things, it starts to change their entire financial condition. I notice that when they don't believe they can do things, they don't do them. So the whole purpose of this philosophy is to induce my students to build up habits of belief in themselves and in their ability to direct their minds to whatever they want in life, and to keep their minds off the things they don't want. If you don't know too much about Mahatma Gandhi, it'd be a good idea if you to get a book and read up on the life of Mahatma Gandhi. There's a man who didn't have anything to fight the British with except his own mind. He didn't have any soldiers, he didn't have any money, he didn't have any military equipment, he didn't even own a pair of breeches. And yet he put to rout the great British Empire with his mind power, just resisting them. He didn't want them, he didn't accept them, and finally the British picked up, they got the big idea and got out. Surprising how many individuals will do that when you set your mind against them. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything, you just have to say in your own mind, I don't want that person in my life, and eventually he'll get out, sometimes very quickly. I'm telling you, this mind power stuff, it's powerful, it's potent, it's marvelous, it's profound if you once become acquainted with it and start using it. Now, this philosophy is the medium by which one's thought habits may be controlled until they are taken over by cosmic habit force. And it is well to here call attention to the fact that no one has ever been known to become financially independent without having first established a prosperity consciousness. Just as no one may remain physically well without having first established a health consciousness. I remember so well my greatest difficulty when I started out with Andrew Carnegie. My greatest difficulty was forgetting that I was born in poverty and illiteracy and ignorance. It took me a long time to forget the little mountain hut in the mountains of Wise County, Virginia, where I was born. Long time before I could forget about that and get it out of my system. And always when I'd start out to interview an outstanding man, I'd think, oh well, I'm so insignificant. When I come into his presence, I guess I'll be ashamed and afraid because I remembered where I came from. I remembered my poverty. It was a long time before I could shake that poverty off. But finally I did it. And when I began to think in terms of opulence, I began to say then, well, why wouldn't Mr. Edison see me? Why wouldn't Mr. Wanamaker see me? Because I'm just as big in my field as he is in his. I not only felt that, ladies and gentlemen, but I saw the day when I made it come true. It's an achievement when you can reach out and influence the lives of millions of people all over the world beneficially. I say that's an achievement. And I say it never would have been done if I hadn't changed the habits, thoughts of Napoleon Hill. That was my biggest job, believe me. My biggest job was not getting in to see the men of affairs and to get their collaboration. That was easy. My biggest job was to change the habits of thinking of Napoleon Hill. And had I not changed those habits, the books that I have written that inspire millions of people never would have had the effect that they had. Because when an author writes a book or makes a speech, the exact mental attitude that he's in when he's speaking or writing is conveyed to his audience, and no man lives who is smart enough to keep that audience from picking up the thoughts. You read a book that anybody writes, and you have impressions about that writer as you read that book. And you couldn't possibly read one of my books without knowing down deep in your heart that I'm dealing with fundamental principles, as fundamental as infinite intelligence itself. You know that. You don't need anybody to prove it to you. And before I could write books of that kind, I had to completely build over my thought processes, my habits of thinking, and learn to keep my mind on the things that were positive and keep it on there automatically. fixations of fear and faith. Did you know that each one of you came over to this plane with a marvelous doctoring system of your own? Did you know that? A chemist, don't you know, that breaks up your food and distributes it, takes out of it the things that nature needs? And did you know that if you think right, eat right, exercise right, and live right, you know that this doctor inside of you does everything else automatically? They call it body resistance. I don't care what you call it. It's a system that nature gave you for balancing everything that you need to keep your body in fine condition all the time. But you have to do your part. Now, faith. A fixation's a wonderful thing if it doesn't happen to be a negative fixation. But you want to look out for these fixations of fear and self-limitations, the things that you can't do, the fear of criticism or the fear of anything else. But if you want to make use of fixation and benefit by the law of cosmic habit force in doing so, go to work on the fixation of faith. Fixation of applied faith. Now there's a fixation you can tie to. And there's a fixation, if you tie to it properly, when you reach out there and call for the things you need, you'll find them always in place. If they're not where you thought they were, they'll be close at hand. By all means, cultivate that kind of a fixation. Don't let it get away from you by neglect. How do you go about making a fixation of anything? Any thought habit? How do you go about it? Repetition, that's right, and applying it in everything you do and think and say. Repetition. Some of you are old enough to have remembered the Coué formula, day by day, and every way I'm getting better and better. Millions of people all over this country were saying that. And it didn't amount to a tinker's dam, not swearing, D-A-M, a little small coin, unless the person saying it believed it. It wasn't what he said that counted, it was what he thought while he was saying it. And there were a lot of people that said it over and over again and then finally turned thumbs down on it because they said, oh, it didn't work for me because I didn't believe in it in the first place. You can understand why it didn't work. It makes no difference what formula you use or whether you use any oral formula or not, as long as your thought patterns are positive and you can repeat them over and over again. I want you to follow the habits of thinking in positive terms until cosmic habit force takes up your mental attitude and makes it predominantly positive and not predominantly negative. The circumstances of life are such that the majority of people their minds are predominantly negative all the time. Now what you want to do is to change all of that and make the mind predominantly positive all the time. So no matter what you want, you can turn on the power and get some response from infinite intelligence. Infinite intelligence is not going to do anything for you while you're in a state of anger, no matter how much right you have to be angry. Infinite intelligence is not going to do anything for you, but she's going to let you do something to yourself if you keep yourself in a state of a negative mind. You can't afford to go into action. You can't afford to go into expression. You can't afford to have human relationships while you're in a negative mental attitude. And the best way to keep from being in the negative mental attitude is to start to build up these positive habits and to let cosmic habit force take them over and make them predominant in your mind. Here are the negatives that you should avoid making into fixations. Poverty, imaginary illness, laziness, just plain everyday garden variety of laziness. You know what a lazy man is? He's a man who hasn't found a labor of love. That's right. No lazy people except those who haven't found something they like to do. Of course, some of them are pretty hard to please. They go all the way through life and have an alibi. They don't like this, don't like that. As a matter of fact, they don't like anything, period. They're lazy. And envy and greed and anger and hatred and jealousy and dishonesty and drifting without aim or purpose, irritability of mental attitude in general, vanity, arrogance, cynicism, sadism, and the will to injure others. Now, those are things that become fixation in the lives of most people, and you can't afford to have that kind of a fixation. You just can't afford it. It's too expensive. Even as a student of the science of success, I'd still say it's too expensive for you. You can't have that kind of a habit. nor fixation. But down here are the positives that you can't afford to have and you can't afford not to have them. The definiteness of a major purpose in life heads the list. Make it a fixation by all means. Eat it, sleep it, drink it, and indulge in some act every day of your life leading in the direction of your overall major purpose in life. And faith, personal initiative, enthusiasm, willingness to go the extra mile, imagination, the traits of a pleasing personality, accurate thinking, and all the other traits recommended in this philosophy of individual achievement. Now, those are the things that you can afford to make into fixations so that they dominate your mind. You live by them. You think by them. And you act by them. You relate yourself to people by them. And you'll be surprised at how quickly you can give yourselves changed lives. You'll be surprised at how quickly the people who have tried to injure you will, of their own accord, fall away and become ineffective and impotent. You'll be surprised at how potent you'll become, how you'll attract to you new opportunities. You'll be surprised at how quickly you'll solve your problems when they arise. And you wonder why you didn't do it before. Instead of worrying over your problem, why you just didn't get busy and dissolve it or solve it. On every one of those, you'll notice every one is under your control, subject to your control as a result of repetition of thought. That's all you have to do. Just keep repeating it over and over and over again and put some action behind the thought. Words without deeds, are dead. Engage in some sort of action. One should develop fixations by all means, but one should take care to see that they are fixations on the subject of that which one wants, not that which one does not want. Isn't it a strange thing that the majority of people go all the way through life with getting everything they don't want and very few things that they do want? Isn't that funny? You know a lot of people who don't get the mate in marriage that they really want after they get him or her and find out about it. I know a lot of people like that. I know a lot of people who don't get out of their jobs what they want. I know a lot of people who do not get out of their profession what they want. They'd like to have more patience and better patience with better dispositions. Incidentally, there's an idea. You know how a professional man, like a dentist or a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, how he goes about attracting a lot of patients that are agreeable to get along with? Wonderful patients, pay their bills promptly and all that sort of thing. Do you know how he does it?
Be that way himself.
Yeah, be that way himself. That's right. You set him out, though. That's the idea. In other words, the effect starts with the professional man himself. His own mental attitude toward his clients or his patients is what determines what they do toward him. No getting away from that. That's absolutely true. That happens to a merchant, happens to a man or woman in a job or any other person, in any other connection. In other words, if you want to reform people, don't start with the people, start with you. And get your mental attitude right, and you'll find that the others will fall in line. They can't do anything about it. As a matter of fact, if your mind is positive, the negative-minded person can't influence you in the least. Nothing he can do about it. A positive-minded person is always the master of the negative-minded person. That is, if he exercises his rights. We're what we are today, ladies and gentlemen, because of two forms of heredity. Now, one of them we control outright, and one of them we do not control at all. Through physical heredity, we bring into this world a little sum total of all of our ancestors. Now, if we happen to be born with nice brain power, nice, well-developed, rounded-out bodies, fine. But if we happen to be born with a hunchback or some affliction, there's nothing much we can do about that. In other words, we have to take what physical heredity hands us as it is. I know a man afflicted with the loss of his legs through polio who ran a peanut stand within 2 blocks of the White House, and right in the White House, a man afflicted with the same thing was running the biggest nation in the world. And he made an asset out of his affliction instead of a liability. Social heredity, however, is another thing. Social heredity consists of all of the influences that enter into your life after you were born, and maybe dating back to the prenatal stage, even before you were born. The things you hear, the things you see, the things you are taught, the things you read about, the legends that you were influenced by, and all that sort of thing, constitutes social heredity, and by far and away the most important part of what happens to us all the way through life is due to our relationship to social heredity, or what we get out of our environment and how much we control it. No, this social heredity thing, you know, it's a good idea for all of us, all adults, to go back and re-examine ourselves about these vital things that we think we believe in, find out just what right we have to believe them. Where do we get our beliefs? What is there to support any belief? So help me, I don't think I have any beliefs that are not supported by good sound evidence, or at least what I believe to be evidence. But I didn't arrive at that open-minded state of tolerance overnight. I'll tell you that now. There was a time when I was just about as intolerant as the next one. But I found out that that was a bad thing for me, and certainly not good for my students to have a closed mind about anything. Thank you very much.